Sydney, Nova Scotia. And now we're going to go into the studio and check in with Heidi.
Thanks very much, Cyril. There are plenty of issues for Canadians to think about leading up to the expected federal election this fall. Canada's nurses are hoping to put healthcare on the forefront, and the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions has now launched its campaign highlighting its concerns. This is National Nursing Week, an appropriate time for the campaign launch, also being supported by provincial nurses unions. And Janet Hazelton of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union is here this morning to talk about the issues at hand. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, everyone looking forward to that election. And the Canadian Federation of Nurses Union is now a registered lobbyist. What does that mean for the federal election?
Well, nurses across this country that are represented by nurse unions are going to become quite active in this federal election. And we're going to encourage our nurses to talk to their neighbors and friends about how important it is that the federal government continue to give health care or make health care a priority. Canadians believe health care is a priority. And we believe that it is an election issue, regardless of what political parties say about that.
So there are a few specific issues that nurses want addressed. What are some examples?
Well, one of the things that we want to talk about is the work life of a nurse. And nurses are in a profession that creates a lot of illness, injury, and we need to talk about that and decide what are we going to do to make sure that the work life of a nurse is such that they don't want to leave the profession. And unfortunately, about 20% of our nurses leave the profession within the first 5 years. That's an unacceptable amount.
So why is that?
Well, burnout, lots of overtime, lots of expected overtime. So trying to get that work-life balance for a nurse is very difficult. We believe that if we sit with both our provincial and federal governments to talk about a sustainable health human resource plan for nursing, that we might be able to come up with some solutions that nurses will stay and work in their provinces and in this country.
What about growing aging population?
Well, we have about 15% of Canadians are over the age of 65. We expect we know over the next 10 years, that's going to increase to 30%. So 30% of Canadians are going to be over the age of 65. So we need to talk about what are we going to do to make sure that they're healthy for as long as they need to be and stay in their home as long as they can. But we also need to say, so what are we going to do for them when they're not able to stay in their home? What kind of long-term plan do we have? And right now there isn't one. Most provinces, like ours, is struggling with no beds for our seniors. Our long-term care beds are non-existent. So we need to talk about that. People are living longer, and we want them to live longer healthy. But when they're not healthy, what are we going to do about that?
And that also ties back to the need for nurses to stay in the jobs, because you need nurses for all of that, right?
And we need our federal government. The proposal by the federal government is they're really wanting to back away from health care and health care funding. And that's not appropriate. The provinces do administer health care, and we all know this. But we need federal funds. And what this current government's plan is, we'll remove about $36 billion from health care across this country. And if that's removed, that's just going to make all of these situations that we're just talking about worse.
So how do you find the money for all these kinds of things?
Well, if Canadians believe health care is important, then I think we need to look at what kinds of things are money being spent on, and ask Canadians, what are you willing to pay? And I think we'd be surprised that they are willing to pay for a sustainable healthcare system that is going to look after them, their parents, their aging parents, their children. We need a healthcare system that's going to be here today for us and tomorrow for our children and our aging population.
So plenty of issues to talk about, of course, with the federal election. And there will actually be 1,000 nurses coming to Nova Scotia at the beginning of June, and I'm sure these issues will be talked about a lot.
We plan to talk to our nurse leaders to engage them in this federal election. We want to make this an issue on the doorsteps. We want the people that we're about to elect to tell us, what is your plan for our healthcare system? And vote according to what we hear.
All right. Well, we'll keep track of that. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Let's go over now to Elise, who's standing by with your very first day planner of the morning.